Hi everybody, it is time to talk about the full moon in Taurus on November the 5th. For me, on a Wednesday morning here Pacific time. You can determine what that time would be for you. There are, I guess, four things to say about this full moon. I think there are four things to say about it. Let's dive in. Let me see if I can list the four things up front. One is, of course, the increasing energy. Things that I typically would say about a full moon as we head to it, to pay attention to a mounting intensity and a kind of jangliness that accompanies getting to a full moon. The second thing is that the fact that the full moon is actually trining the south node of the moon, that is the primary aspect it is making, makes it a fascinating full moon. So can't wait to talk about that. And then the fact that this full moon is actually in relationship, this is point number 3, to the Scorpio new moon on the 19th of November. And so what data point does it provide us from the opposite part of the chart, the Taurus part of the chart? Taurus and Scorpio opposing points that we need to take into consideration as we enter into the 4-week period that the new moon in Scorpio is going to initiate on November the 19th, when we take steps and take action to bring the Scorpio part of the chart into alignment with what we value and what we desire. And finally, the other aspects that are encoded into this new moon: Jupiter trining Saturn, Jupiter trining Neptune, Venus squaring Pluto. And because the full moon, of course, is trining the south node, the sun is trining the north node. So, all right, let's dive into this. As we head into the next 4 or 5 days, we should expect, archetypally, the energies to kind of mount. As I like to say, the wave crashes to the shore, the pot of milk comes to the boil and can spill over emotionally and intuitively. Feelings and there can be meltdowns, tantrums, emotional releases, full moony behavior, tears, for people who are susceptible to bleeding, nosebleeds, etc., kind of, sort of fluidic intensity, passions, desires to some extent, but really, as the moon represents our engagement with 3D reality, and I've always said, if you want to get a sense of what the primary energies are on any given day, always consider which house the moon is traveling through at that point in time. The moon typically takes about 2.5 days to go over each house in your chart in succession, and which house the moon is traveling through in your lunar return chart for that time. And a lunar return, I know certainly on something like www.astro.com, you can get your lunar return chart very, very easily for any particular point in time, but you do need to know what you're doing a little bit. And the lunar return is drawn not for your birth chart location, but for the location that you're currently in. So those are a few points. I really have been meaning to do a separate video on lunar returns in general, so at some point I'll get to it. If the whole lunar return discussion feels a little too advanced, I'm sorry to use that word. If it offends anybody, ignore it. But I'm constantly amazed by how I can always see where the moon is in my birth chart and in the lunar return chart, and it will always tell me where the bulk of the outflow of energy at that time, or significant events that are happening at that time, are occurring. So as the moon expands, as it gets more and more and more light from the sun, as it becomes fuller, as it becomes greater visibility, our emotional and intuitive responses to what is going on around us increases. Typically with a full moon, when the moon is larger, we have more energy, in a sense. Not in a sense, I don't want to be vague. We have more energy, as opposed to when the moon is darker. We can be flatter and more depressed. And so the mounting energy can both make us productive and busy and even but can lead to a point of overwhelm. I've said this tons of times on this channel. The most productive energy at any given point in time is the week after the full moon, when things are more imbalanced. The moon's expanding energy can create its own drama and dramatic tension, so that whatever productivity we're feeling just becomes a little bit over the top. And getting to the full moon is the classic time if I've got so much to do, and well, this is not going to get done, and this is not going to, this is happening, and this is happening, and it leads to a kind of irritation and stress. So full moons can be representations of stress, suppressed emotional and intuitive responses to things. And as I always say, whether it is you who's having a moment or a meltdown around a full moon or somebody else, always pay attention to it, because it might represent something that is worth looking at, because it might be a truth, an emotional truth for somebody, how they're really feeling about something that is coming up for consideration, and should be taken into account. Full moons can also positively bring visibility for the period of time around the full moon. So someone can, if you're having a full moon in your 10th house, or even especially 11th house or 3rd house, or it could all of a sudden there could be something going on that gives you visibility over social media, or something gets announced, or it can lead to culminations, harvests, particularly for seeds planted around the new moon in the same sign 6 months ago. So if the full moon is happening in Taurus right now, about 6 months ago, there was a new moon in Taurus, and there's an arc of sort of increasing activity, an arc, like a rainbow's arc that starts from that new moon, gets to its highest point around the full moon in Taurus, and then it's going to start to wind down until the next new moon starts on an annual basis. So seeds that are planted, intentions that are planted around the new moon in Taurus earlier this year, you're now making me think about the exact date of that new moon, so I'm going to look that up. Can feel like they're coming into some sort of culmination or harvest, but booking things and contracts and departures, all of those could be. So I would say to anybody, just watch the energy and try and make sure that what you're putting on your plate, try to counterbalance things. Also, because by the time we get past the full moon, Mercury will be quite stationary between, let's say, November 6th to the 9th, the day after the full moon. So we're already, we are aware that we're moving forward in a kind of an unsettled way. As I've told you in my last video that I did about Mercury being in his shadow degrees, we need to get to a more conclusive place about certain things and certain energies and certain dynamics. So we might get to that. Sorry, I'm just like, let me get you that new moon and Taurus date from earlier this year, because for some reason that OCD side of me is not going to let it go. Give me 1 second. I don't have all the new moons and the full moons in a year memorized. Not that anyone's expecting anybody to, but it's coming up. Mercury retrogrades, succinctly, because I've already done a video on this a couple of days ago, are time periods when it becomes clear to us that if we're moving forward based on certain assumptions, which of those assumptions will hold true, and if our train is on a certain track, whether we need to continue to remain on that track or we need to go back to the drawing board and we can continue to go in the same direction but switch tracks slightly based on what it is that we're learning about a particular situation or a circumstance. Here we go. And so what the shadow period of Mercury, especially the first part, gives us a sense of is that things are galloping, but there's also this feeling that things aren't concluded. And it often takes a Mercury retrograde period to give us enough information to conclude them, often through a period of a certain amount of confusion, of recognizing that things aren't exactly going to go as we thought or assumed they were, and there might be some alternate thing, that alternate path or route that needs to be taken. That was a fly. Goodness. New moon in Taurus. April 27th, my dears. April 27th. April 27th. At 8 degrees of Taurus. And the full moon is on November the 5th at 13 degrees of Taurus. So, anyway. So Mercury being in his shadow degrees can also create a certain amount of not anxiety, just a feeling that things are not entirely falling into place, but there's a feeling that certain things might be imminent. But for those of us who know about the Mercury retrograde energies, bigger meanings, both a desire for essential things to get clarified so that we know which path is actually right for us, and an anticipation of needing Mercury retrograde to clarify where should we be investing our energies for the next 3 months or so when Mercury goes retrograde the next time. So as we head towards this full moon, try and take care of yourself. This idea of juggling various things that could be feeling like they're about to topple over and things are happening. And, it's kind of interesting that the Two of Pentacles, of course, is pentacles and coins, essentially, and Taurus is kind of a famously material sign. But this, just see if you can introduce a tone of self-care so that you're paying attention to what is coming up in you, and you're honoring it and listening to it. Full moons can sometimes give you the impetus, particularly if they're happening in your first house or second house. So if you are a Taurus rising or an Aries rising, sometimes a full moon in your first or second house can give you the impetus to, express something in a situation or put an end to something in a situation that especially because the Sun and Venus and Mercury and Mars are in the 7th or 8th houses, that when it comes to certain partnerships or contracts or employers or family members or marriage partners, kind of at least getting in touch with how you're really feeling about something, even if it has been suppressed. It can be a time of expression in the chart where the full moon is occurring. And especially if the full moon occurs in the first, second, to some extent third house, it could be an expression from your side. If the full moon is in the 7th and 8th houses, it could be an expression from whoever it is that you're partnered with, or partnered to, or contracted to. Yeah, just stuff to pay attention to, right? Sometimes when full moons occur in first houses, especially, to a lesser extent in second houses, and a lesser extent in third houses, but it's present, it can mean that we decide to exit a situation, or walk out on a situation, or end a situation, or culminate a situation that has had a certain amount of mounting dissatisfaction. But a fuller moon tends to operate with an energy that is similar to, not exactly the same as, Mars energy. We get an infusion of energy to set boundaries. We get an infusion of energy to express ourselves. And I would just say, as always, assertive, not aggressive. Pay attention to the emotional truth. The full moon can give you the energy to end a situation or to walk out on a situation that you want to or you need to. Just as always with more extreme energies, balance them out a little bit to make sure that you're factoring in matters related to security. Sometimes walking out of a situation can make us feel more secure. Sometimes walking out of a situation can mean that a whole energy leak is being eliminated. Resignations, departures can be very full moon like, or I'm putting an end to this, or I'm taking a break, or we need a break from each other, or, that kind of stuff. I don't know why I'm going down this tangent. But that can be I'm resigning, I'm walking out, the situation comes to an end, especially depending on where the full moon is occurring for you. As I said, there can also be visibility. The full moon's happening in the 10th of the 11th houses. Okay, so that's sort of the full moon energy, and the fact that if you, it's a little bit like if you're carrying a tray from one location to the other, from the kitchen to the dining room, from the dining room to the kitchen, there can be a tendency for a lot to get put on that tray, so that by the time you get to the full moon time period, there's so much on that the sheer productivity of overloading your tray to take things from the kitchen to from the dining room to the kitchen can get compromised by how much is on that tray, and things can topple over. So just kind of practice appropriate self-care and prioritization and what is on your task list. Use the energy to get things done, but just know that you don't ideally want your productivity to be compromised by a kind of a jangly emotional energy, which can create its own fatigue, and so then that productivity gets compromised. By the time you're done with the full moon, even though this time around we're going to be dealing with a stationary Mercury, and that will come with its own craziness, delays and lost baggage and showing up at the wrong place at the wrong time and all that kind of stuff, and technology snafus and breakdowns. We'll get to it. It'll be what it'll be. That's a ridiculous thing to say. The energies are more productive the week after the full moon. So just this is more time I've spent on full moon energies than I think in any other part of the video. But for whatever it's worth, it's what's coming out. So it's kind of worth mentioning. Practicing appropriate self-care and being present as things kind of become more intense energetically. Now let's come to the most important thing about the Taurus full moon, which is that it is trining the South Node in Virgo. Wherever the South Node goes, something needs to be released, and that something is often a source of a certain amount of security. It is like that job that keeps the lights on and that you can do relatively easily because it's a kind of a strength. It's something that you can depend on and rely on. But there's an awareness that while you can tap into it to create a certain amount of security, that security is not enough to be fulfilling. So it's a little bit like that job that you can do to bring in certain things, and it comes relatively easily to you, and you're in a sort of comfort zone with it. There can even be a kind of a sense of magic as to how easily you can generate or do certain things with it, because there's an inbuilt strength, kind of a mysteriously inbuilt strength and a mysterious sense of luck. But there's an awareness that it will never provide enough to allow you to either meet certain goals or bring a certain amount of fulfillment. In fact, there might be a feeling that it's almost like a tree that is overripe with fruit, where you'll be able to get to some of that fruit, but some of it is going to need to drop off. Or it's a means to an end, and the end is symbolized more by what the North Node in Pisces is encouraging you to move towards. These North Node, South Node eclipses on the Pisces-Virgo axis are active from the middle of July of 2024 to February 27. And we are currently in an eclipse cycle with the last new moon solar eclipse in Virgo on September 21st that has a corresponding lunar eclipse on March the 3rd of 2026. So the week before and after September 21st, November 21st, January the 3rd, March the 3rd are important weeks when it comes to being milestones with regard to what it is that needs to be released in the Virgo part of the chart. With eclipses, you've heard me say, you don't need to rush anything. The eclipses will make things happen for you. But when we are in a 6-month period where we have a new moon and a full moon eclipse, both in the same sign, like an opening parentheses and a closing parentheses, and that they are south node eclipses, there can be a sense that we are really back in a location or back in a situation that we need to be in the process of releasing, because it is in the releasing of a certain amount of this energy that will create the space for us to lean into what we need to. Now, the nodes work together. You know, the North Node might argue and say, well, the more you lean into me, the more naturally you'll be able to release what is a source of strength and security, but not enough that it will fulfill you or allow you to meet certain goals. It's like that job that will keep the lights on, keep going, be mysteriously easy for you, but it's not going to lead to your being able to retire. Or it instinctively feels like it's not where your fortune is, or your goals are. It's not what the universe is encouraging you to spend your time on, but sometimes cutting off the South Node prematurely can create its own crisis. So I always say, what do you think the North Node eclipses in Pisces, in the house occupied by Pisces in your chart, are trying to get you to move towards? And as you make more and more time for that and you move towards it, whatever it is that needs to be released to make time for you to move more towards that carrot at the end of the stick symbolized by the North Node and the Pisces part of the chart, the South Node will naturally atrophy at a certain point in time and drop off. And an archetypal example I give is you're in a job 40 hours a week. You start to understand that you need to give a certain amount of time to it. So you start to give 10 hours a week to what you desire, and then 30 hours a week, or you reach an agreement that you're going to be giving 25 hours a week in whatever it needs that needs to be released. But as time goes on and you actually invest in the right place, that starts to take over. And at a certain point, whatever job you're working can come to you and say, hey, look, you said 25 hours a week, but we're noticing that you're putting in 18. And it gives you the chance to say, well, this is what's going on. And for that job to say, okay, well, you can stay and work 18 or 15, or we've got to make it to 20 or 22. And at a certain point, it becomes clear when that job needs to end, because you've been able to replace it with what you need to get to. I think what I'm saying is there's a lot of focus on, a lot of awareness on cleanup and release with this eclipse cycle between 21st of September of this year to March the 3rd of next year. We may not release what it is that we're meant to until all the way to February 27. We may get to a point of releasing it by the time we get to March the 3rd. We might find that, wow, we've really been able to tune it out significantly. You don't have to act in an eclipsy way to end something prematurely, because as I said, it'll create its own security crisis. But what is fascinating about this full moon is that it brings a certain culmination of energy in the house occupied by Taurus. That should actually, I don't know, either make it increasingly clear what needs to be released. It could also just be an internal feeling and resolution of, you know what, this is not entirely working. This thing that is bringing me a certain amount of security is not bringing, something's got to shift. I've got to start to shift in the direction that is more right for me. And I've really got to actively start to take steps to minimize my involvement in what is helping and is a source of security or security blanket, but that security blanket can't overwhelm. The risk with the South Node is that that source of security can overwhelm you in such a way that your dreams and your aspirations just kind of die on the vine. And that's not fun, because you choose to keep that security blanket around you. And security blankets can serve a purpose, but they can also kind of stultify. They can also kind of choke off. You got to get off the island. You know, there's almost this kind of sense of, let's start to ferry in the right direction here. And what needs to be left behind can come to a place naturally as we head either towards March of 26 or February of 27. But let's continue to be on that process. And what is it that this full moon brings up in the Taurus part of the chart that creates a certain harmony or contribution or an encouragement to move along this path of releasing what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart, the house occupied by Virgo in your chart? At the same time, the sun in the Scorpio part of the chart, the part of the chart that, you know, at least as of right now, has Mars and Mercury. Actually, no, Mercury's moved into Sag, sorry, 2 or 3 days ago, but has Mars right now. And the sun. The sun, of course, is trining the North Node. So there's just this awareness with the sun in the North Node and the full moon in Taurus trining the nodal axis to say, we're really trying to bring an awareness to an intensification, but in certain cases, even certain manifestations, because full moons can bring culminations or offers or an increased intensity in a certain direction, or that contributes to this axis of what do I need to lean into and build and what do I need to release. So for some of you, does an event occur? Does something come up for you to be harvested? Is there an offer? Is there something that pushes you, continues to push you along the path of, yep, that thing that I am doing that is helpful on some level, but I know I need to be kind of slowly and gradually releasing from my life, even though it's a kind of a security blanket, it's not actually providing enough. Sometimes with the South Node, I mean, if you have the South Node eclipses going over your 8th house and the North Node eclipses going on the 2nd house, or the South Node eclipses going over your 7th house and the North Node in the 1st house, so that would make you, my goodness, that would make you, dear ones, a Virgo rising. No, it would not. No, it would not. It would make you, God, what is wrong with me? It would make you a Pisces rising or an Aquarius rising. If you're Aquarius or Pisces rising and the North Node eclipses are going over your 2nd house or your 1st house and the South Node over the 8th or the 7th house, it's not just a question of, because what you're having to contemplate is relationships and codependencies that need to be released. That process can be a lot more painful than, oh, I've got to minimize my involvement with this job. There could actually be an awareness that matters related to wills, legacies, marriage, marriage partners, partnerships, business partnerships are coming to a head in some ways, that you're being forced to rely on your own independence. It's funny, I just did an Aquarius rising video in the membership part of my channel. And it's just kind of coming to me. So those, you know, having the South Node eclipses go over the 8th and the 7th houses can be quite challenging, quite painful, because you're having to deal with the fact that there may be some important relationships or contracts or situations that you could be attached to or you were hoping would be a source of security and strength. Wow, there's something about the plumbing in this apartment that has started to happen. Apartment complexes are always interesting because you are, you know, there's someone living above you and below you and to the side of you. The kind of plumbing thing that kind of fills up the cisterns and the WCs is becoming so loud at times that I'm just like, what is going on? It's like a waterfall. Um, things to be constantly checked out when it comes to wherever it is that we are residing. Never a dull moment, right? Things are always threatening to kind of fall apart, or need attention and repair. And for me, Scorpio sits in my fourth house of homeland real estate. So I'm like, okay, that's not where my full moon is, though. But I do want to say that sometimes the South Node eclipses are not as rational as, oh, I need to release this. Yes, it's a source of strength, and yes, it's a security blanket. But when will I ever get to a point when I can really focus entirely on what I want to? That is its own unrest. But when it comes to these eclipses occurring, for example, on the 1st and the 7th house axis, particularly when the South Node is going over the 8th or the 7th houses, can be quite challenging and painful, because we're talking about potentially escorting people off of the boat, because those relationships are no longer constructive or productive, or can become even a source of loss. We were hoping that they would be a source of security, but they no longer are. Divorces, separation, ending things with family members, becoming clear that they're not going to be a source of bolstering you, and that you need to rely more and more on yourself. So the biggest thing about this Taurus full moon is this support, this natural support towards this axis of leaning into the Pisces part of the chart, the house occupied by Pisces in your chart, and releasing what you need to. So, and because it's a trine, and because there's some heavy trine energy associated with this full moon, and because we are in the midst of these grand water trines between the personal planets going over Scorpio, trining the planets in Pisces, the North Node, Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter in Cancer. As I've talked about in my last few videos, and certainly if you want to get a sense of the compass of the time, I would look at this full moon video, and I would look at that Mercury in shadow video that I did a couple of days ago. It will give you a more complete sense, and especially with this portal of stability, opportunity that is opened up, that doesn't reach a point of conclusiveness until the first week of December. But we're in the midst of trying to stabilize certain things. One of the things to look forward to with this Taurus full moon, considering it's trining the South Node and the Sun is trining the North Node, is what happens that is fundamentally supportive to this process of releasing what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart and leaning towards the Pisces part of the chart. That is actually encouraging and nice to see. You know, as I said, in certain cases, for some people, it might be that a job comes through or something comes through that encourages you along this path of, okay, I'm at a point. Or there's also a likelihood that you are coming up to a culmination point where you just realize, you know what, I'm going to have to put my energy and focus more on where I feel there's greater potential. And that thing is only going to show greater potential if I can put that energy and time in that direction. And that means that I'm going to have to enter a period where I am proactively prioritizing in such a way that that thing that gives me security is going to have to take second place to what it is that I'm building. I'm going to still try to keep that commitment, but I'm going to shift my focus, or else I'm never going to get to that point where I can really lean into and build what I know is a more reliable source of the kind of security that I want. But I'm going to have to start the process of removing the security blanket by doing nothing other than just putting my priorities where my priorities really are, and changing my productivity and day-to-day activities to support the direction I want to be in. And let's just see where that process continues to take us as we head towards the March lunar eclipse in Virgo and the final lunar eclipse in Virgo in February 27. Now, the third thing I wanted to say is pay attention to what comes up with this full moon, because it may be a data point that you need to take into consideration The bulk of the personal planetary energy is and has been in the Scorpio part of the chart. Mars was the first of the personal planets to enter Scorpio on September 22nd, and Mars is getting ready to leave Scorpio on November the 4th. I'm always happy to have Mars go through a certain part of the chart, really, because a lot of our energy goes in that direction, but I can also get to a point eventually when I'm just like, Mars, go to some other part of the chart, because the element of conflict and competition and jangliness that Mars brings can become a little bit fatiguing. Mercury did join Mars from October 6th to October 29th. Mercury, of course, is going to go retrograde on November 9th, and Mercury will be back in Scorpio from November the 19th all the way to December the 11th. So the planet of communication, while currently has left the Scorpio part of the chart, is going to be back first retrograde and then direct between November the 19th and December the 11th. The Sun, of course, enters Scorpio around the same time every year, October the 23rd to November the 22nd. And this gives us that essential energy that we need, the personal planets need, of needing that solar connection to source to really evaluate and observe what is going on in the Scorpio part of the chart. Venus comes into Scorpio from November the 6th to November the 30th. And she should help and bring in a certain amount of harmony to this. Venus coming in at the end of the personal planets transits in a particular house, I really like, because with everything that has been archetypally present with Mars and Mercury, communication and processing, but not conclusive yet, things even feeling like they're a little bit under the surface, and the Sun comes in and then puts this spotlight, and we start to become a little bit more aware, a little bit more present to clarity around what is going on, positive or challenging. And then Venus comes in to say, let me introduce an element of relationship building and even financial opportunity. Let me start to grease the wheels a bit. Let me introduce some luck. Let me introduce some harmony. Let me introduce some healing energy. And we could certainly do with that. The great mystery in the Scorpio part of the chart, of course, is an awareness that certain things are under the surface, undercover, may be very reminiscent of past issues that we're trying to bring a certain amount of closure to, that are connected with minimizing energy leaks in the Pisces part of the chart. Again, what I'm saying right now is developed in greater detail in that video I did 2 days ago with Mercury in the shadow degrees. And of course, Jupiter, a very important planet for this full moon, because on November the 11th, Jupiter goes retrograde. Jupiter is all but stationary at this point in time. And Jupiter's trines to Saturn and Neptune will not be exact, but they're pretty close. But there's something very intriguing about Jupiter getting to a point where he can harmoniously contribute to the stabilization of the Pisces part of the chart. But there's more work to be done, so he reverses between November the 11th to March the 11th in the sign of Cancer. And where Jupiter is, he's ending a 12-13-year cycle and creating a more aligned 12-13-year cycle. Lot of possibility for greater stability in the air, but things have had an under-the-surface quality in the Scorpio part of the chart that is becoming more visible and clearer. When the personal planets go over the same house around the same time every year, we wait for that new moon to occur to create a 4-week month, in this case a 4-week month of Scorpio on November the 19th, so that we can actually start to take action to bring that part of the chart where all these energies have been transiting and contributing their archetypal energies into a place where we can harness them, channel them, and then take the action we need to in order to stabilize that part of the chart. And this new moon that is coming up in Scorpio on the 19th is a little, again, because Mercury is going to be retrograde and conjuncting the new moon, you know, it's going to take If we're really looking for a new moon that is all about forward movement, it's going to take us till the new moon in Sagittarius on December 19th to give us that new moon. Mercury will certainly be direct on November the 29th. And by the time we get to December 3rd, 4th, by the time we get to that Gemini full moon on December the 4th, we will be in Mercury moving forward energy. So that's great. But because the new moon on November the 19th is encoded with a combust Mercury being conjunct to it, Mercury being retrograde and entering Scorpio at the same time, it's almost like, on the one hand, a certain amount of murky under the surface energy in the Scorpio part of the chart. On the other hand, a feeling that an opening is being created to stabilize and manage energy leaks, but it requires our ability to be as mature as possible to achieve that stability. And again, if what I'm saying is intriguing to you, take a look at that video I did 2 days ago about being in the shadow degrees. The new moon that occurs that creates a 4-week window, it's really after we get to December 4th onwards, and increasingly as we get to December 19th, and as we get into the new year, that we'll really feel like, oh, we are on our way from choppier waters to smoother waters. And it doesn't mean that the resolutions are going to be entirely to our satisfaction. It might be a situation where we view something as a glass half full as opposed to glass half empty, but at least we are wise enough to create that scenario and greater stability and fewer energy leaks. There's an element of chess playing. There's an element of being really mature and really present to cause and effect. I could be right, but if I do this or I express myself this way, it could make the situation worse. Or I could be right and I could be effective and figure out how to communicate a certain point and what sort of tone to use so that I can actually be a source of positive change. And especially if you're feeling like you're dealing with some murky, nebulous energy that is reminiscent of the energies you were dealing in the Pisces part of the chart since 2012 and led to some sort of a crisis in 2014, 15, 16, 17, then you are not wrong. That energy is here again because Neptune has dipped back into Pisces. But Saturn in Pisces right now is saying, let's manage and stabilize the hell out of this as the best we can. Let's minimize these energy leaks. And certainly the new moon in Scorpio is going to be trining that Neptune in Pisces. But because that new moon inaugurates a month that it is colored by a retrograde Mercury, and even more intensely a retrograde Mercury that is getting ready to conjunct the sun, there's still a certain amount of things will become progressively clearer as you head through into, head through December. All of this is a way to say that the corresponding full moon, we look whenever it is that we're headed to a new moon and the month that the new moon creates a 4-week period to bring matters related to that house into alignment, we're looking at, is Mars close to the sun or not? It is right now. What has the Mars transit through Scorpio meant? What has the Mercury transit through Scorpio meant? And interesting, Mercury is going to come retrograding back and then go direct. We know that all the communications are not yet complete. And there might be stuff that is going to end up being revealed and that we need to go to the drawing board on. It'll be lovely to have Venus enter the picture in November to bring some healing energy that we really feel like we can tap into, something constructive. Things are becoming more and more visible and clear to us on a soul level, in that kind of mysterious solar intuitive way, where every nook and cranny of the Scorpio part of the chart is revealed. And we can look at every disturbing creature that lurks in the shadows. And then the other thing that we have to account for is the full moon in the opposite part of the chart. Right now, those full moons are happening 2 weeks before the new moon. So the corresponding full moon to a Scorpio new moon is a Taurus full moon, but that full moon is happening 2 weeks before. So with this Taurus full moon, we have to take into account what is it that is coming up with a certain amount of intensity in the Taurus part of the chart that needs to be factored into By the time we get to that new moon in Scorpio and the 4-week window that's going to create to take action to bring the Scorpio part of the chart into alignment, how do we factor that in? Because when you have all this personal planet energy located in one part of the chart, the Scorpio part of the chart, the opposing house asserts itself with that full moon to say, hold on a second, these energies need to be integrated as well. You can never, ever, 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 ever consider matters related to a particular house in the chart without taking the opposing house into account. Who I am and what my independent stance is defined absolutely by who I am in partnership with. So if the transits are going through the first and second house, they will have an impact on my partnerships and contracts and agreements, and those partners will express themselves typically around the full moon. I'm a Leo rising, and this activity, the personal planet activity, is happening in my 4th house. The full moon is happening in my 10th house of career. Is there going to be a link between some career or work-related consideration that I need to factor into as I bring my domestic environment into alignment starting November the 19th? Is there something that comes up that makes me think, oh, I've got to make space for working from home more, or I need to consider how I need to modify my home environment to support my work more? Is there something that comes up around November the 5th that I need to be paying attention to as a contributing factor, where the career part of the chart is saying, hold on a second, with all this stuff that's going on in the real estate homeland sector, don't forget that you need to take action that integrates the opposite part of the chart. And it's the full moon that gives you the messages with regard to what it is that needs to be integrated. In more extreme cases for Leo rising folks, does a job come up that makes you realize that you need to move for some reason? Move cities, move towns, or consider moving overall, or making some kind of a real estate change. I'm just giving you some, an example as to how that might work. So the third thing about this full moon that has to be mentioned is that it is a full moon that is a contributing element to the agenda that you're going to need to follow after the November 19th new moon in Scorpio. So outside of point number 1, which is that there's going to be an increasing intensity that is associated with full moons, and point number 2, that this full moon is trining the South Node in Virgo, so it might create an opportunity, a portal, or may prompt you to think about how it is that you need to move forward, where you need to put your energy, excuse me, where you need to put your energy so that you can release what is a source of a certain amount of security, but not a source of fulfillment, and not the kind of security that can really be something you can invest in. It's a means to an end. And this full moon points to helping you move along the right path about, wow, why do I have something stuck in my throat? And move towards the North Node axis in Pisces and release what you need to in the South Node part of the chart. You also have to consider what comes up around the time of this full moon that is in conversation with everything that is brewing and developing in the Scorpio part of the chart with greater intensity than normal, because we have a Mercury retrograde that has to be factored into the Scorpio part of the chart. Finally, the 4 aspects that are encoded into this full moon are that the Sun trines the North Node. This we know automatically. If the full moon is going to trine the South Node, the Sun is going to trine the North Node. And it's all about what is happening as we head to this full moon that contributes to the natural progression of our having to lean into and grow something and develop something in the Pisces part of the chart and release what we need to in the Virgo part of the chart. Jupiter trining Saturn and Neptune, lovely part of this grand water trine energy that I've been talking about the last few videos. Certainly take a look at the Mercury shadow video 2 days ago to learn more about it. But Jupiter, as he is getting ready to retrograde, a part of his process. Jupiter's 8 months forward, 4 months back, 8 months forward, 4 months back. Is in a kind of a supportive energy, with Saturn, especially in Pisces. Whatever changes that I have made so far in the sign of Cancer, whatever progress I've made so far with regard to ending a 12-13-year cycle and starting a 12-13-year cycle in the house occupied by Cancer in your chart, I'm going to throw my weight behind how that can help stabilize the Pisces part of the chart. And then I'm going to go retrograde to integrate and continue the process of creating these endings and the resulting new beginning in the Cancer part of the chart. Venus squares Pluto. Venus in Libra, Pluto in Aquarius. And this takes us back to the new moon in Libra 2 weeks ago, which squared Pluto. And I'll place a link to that video as well. With that new moon in Libra, don't forget that in the middle of all this Scorpio, a little bit of Sag energy with Mercury now in Sag, Mars getting ready to move into Sag in 3 days' time. As intriguing as the Scorpio part of the chart and the Mercury retrograde, the Sagittarius part of the chart is, quite frankly to me, even more intriguing, because you have Mercury coming into Sag and Mars coming into Sag, but the resolutions around getting to a kind of a peaceful place and bringing the Sag part of the chart to the alignment doesn't even start till, December the 19th. And by then, we'll have Mercury then will be the planet that's kind of the last planet in. But remember that we are in the month of Libra. The last new moon that occurred 2 weeks ago actually occurred in Libra. And there's an urgency to bring the Libra part of the chart into alignment in such a way that it contributes to Pluto transforming the Aquarius part of the chart all the way to 2042, and especially right now, while Pluto is in its early degrees, to loosen the bonds and the ties that is standing in the way of a healthy transformation of the house occupied by Aquarius in your chart. And if you're like, all right, I need to learn more about this, then I want you to go back to the Libra new moon video I did 2 weeks ago. What is interesting about this full moon is that even though it is not in relationship really with the Libra part of the chart, because it is not the Libra part of the chart's full moon, it's the Scorpio part of the chart's full moon. But at the time of the full moon, or shortly after, Venus is in the same point as that new moon in Libra, roughly. And so Venus has been helping out in Libra a great deal from October the 13th to November the 6th, bringing a kind of peace and harmony, and even helping with this new moon that occurred in Libra 2 weeks ago to constructively create something in the Libra part of the chart, to improve dynamics in the Libra part of the chart. It may make you a little bit more passive, but you might get to a point where you are looking at certain relationship and financial opportunities and practicing an element of self-care or diplomacy. Venus tends to work in much more private ways. Mars's decision-making is much more on the surface. Venus's decision-making is much more archetypally feminine, and it possesses a certain strength. And Venus squaring Pluto might have an element of, you know what, I'm done with this. Or, here's greater proof that certain relationships and certain sources of financial stability need to be on the chopping block so that we can move towards transforming the Aquarius part of the chart and manifesting something much healthier through this Plutonian transformation. So the only downside of Venus in any part of the chart is that she can make us more passive. We are less inclined to stand up for ourselves, more inclined to let things be. I think Venus's energy still is more helpful than damaging. But we might be getting to a point in the Libra part of the chart where we are really looking at things and going, where is it that I need to really consider releasing something or cordially scaling back something from a relationship or financial perspective so that the right transformation can occur? As symbolized by Pluto's transit through the Aquarius part of the chart in January 20th and February 20th in the Aquarius part of the chart of 2024 was the biggest harbinger of what Pluto was taking its wrecking ball to. There could also be, with Venus squaring Pluto, a sense that you need to build a bridge or build a relationship or pursue a financial opportunity in the Libra part of the chart with a certain amount of urgency and dependency that Pluto needs you to lean into the Venusian energy in the Libra part of the chart and actually build bridges. It could even be a romantic thing. Be in a place where you can attract a romantic opportunity. Be in a place where you can attract or build bridges for financial opportunities or relationship building opportunities that are even non-romantic. Artistic opportunities that in creating or expanding bridge building or a web or a network of harmony and cordiality and courtliness and collegiality and politeness and good nature, that as you do that, it contributes to this transformation in the Aquarius part of the chart and the loosening of certain ties that are more toxic and that are holding you back. And that it's connected to whatever it is that you are in the middle of. Remember that when a new moon happens, as it did in Libra 2 weeks ago, even though the bulk of the personal planetary energy has now moved into Scorpio and Sag, it is still currently the month of Libra, where action needs to continue to be taken to bring the Libra part of the chart into alignment with what you value there for another 2 weeks or so after the full moon. And this Venus square Pluto is in conversation with that energy. And it may already be in play. There could be something that you are contributing or something that you're in the middle of where your attractiveness, where your creative work, where your relationship building is necessary in this Plutonian journey of transformation in the Aquarius part of the chart. Venus, the ruler of this particular full moon, is in her own sign of Libra. She's squaring Pluto. She's the dispositor of the chart as well. So that's lovely that she's in a sign of her strength and her ownership. But with that Venus squaring Pluto, it also gives this full moon this kind of transformational quality. That trining the South Node in Virgo, this kind of sense of the next milestone towards releasing what you need to in the Virgo part of the chart and building what you need to in the Pisces part of the chart and contributing and helping Pluto create the transformation for you in the Aquarius part of the chart, all while these grand trines are happening between the personal planets going over Scorpio, North Node, Saturn, Neptune, and Pisces, Jupiter, and Cancer. And again, no video is done in isolation. So this particular video is very much in conversation with the Mercury shadow video a couple of days ago and the Libra new moon video a couple of weeks ago, and I'll place links to both of them at the end of this video. Feel free to subscribe to my channel, dear ones, if you haven't already. And when you subscribe, there's a bell icon. When you click subscribe, click the wiggly bell on top. You'll be notified when I do new videos. There are 3 ways to engage with me: the free content I put out on this website, the $6.99 a month membership part of this channel, where I post rising signs specific videos. You can watch them for your sun and moon. They're really meant for your rising signs. And my email address is in the description box below. You can reach out to me there if you want a personal reading. You can contribute to this channel for free by liking this video and commenting on it. You can contribute to this channel monetarily by using the thanks button underneath this video, or by donating to it. Information on that is in the description box below. You can hype this video. It's still a bit of a mystery to me. I think you're given certain points every month that you can distribute around. I don't know. But if you find this video useful, I think all those actions can help give, whether you're contributing this channel for free or whatever it is, can give videos greater circulation. Feel free to tell people about this channel, of course, if you find the content useful. I know that my content, I don't find generic astrological interpreting satisfying or necessarily all that relevant, or to be perfectly honest with you. So I know that my content tends to be geared a little bit more towards people who already know their chart. And I can always, by the way, again, this feels like a shameless sales plug, and I guess in some ways it is, I can always create an easy to read version of your chart for you as well. So just email me if that's something you're interested in. I can give you a sense of pricing around that. All right, my dears, I'm going to leave it at this. It's a necessary full moon to do. Let's see how things kind of mount. And you know, we've got the full moon on the 5th and Mercury going retrograde on the 9th. So not really a dull moment when it comes to things coming up. Take care.